Hello, welcome back to another edition of the European Tour Picks and Bets. Skylar Hoke here with my man Tom Jacobs. Tom, how's it going?
That's good. It's a beautiful week. It's one of those weeks where absolutely no one in the world wants to bet on this kind of golf, and this is when we get our best information, I think.
No, I tune up for these type of events. They're the ones where 150 to 1 pays across the board. If it's Cameron Champ at the 3M, if it's somebody in the Olympics, if it's somebody in the Challenge Tour, or an event that is a mix of everything, like we see this week at the ISPS Honda World Invitational. So we saw quite a victory yesterday for Nacho. Nacho Elvira did everything he could not to win that on the 18th hole, sadly, with a 3-putt from 18 feet. But Harding returned the favor in the playoff. A little bit sad that my 1,500 to tip was done by the time I woke up on Thursday morning. But like I mentioned, 1,498 more chances at these. So a lot more to go. But no, excited to dive into this week's field as, again, we see some value across guys and some lesser tours that are getting opportunities, as well as dive into a little bit of the Olympics that are coming up with a certain Italian bound for the podium. So we'll be playing at Galgorm Castle Golf Course. This is our golf club. This is last seen at the Irish Open in 2020, where John Catlin was your winner. Also a frequent course on the Challenge Tour, was played also on the Challenge Tour just last year too, where Tyler Covisto, I believe that's how you pronounce it, not great at that, but he came out of absolutely nowhere on the Challenge Tour. His first ever OWGR start, won the event by 2. And then in previous years, we have seen it on the Challenge Tour with Jack Senior, Callum Hill being some of those winners at this course. But Tom, what is some insight into what they'll be facing this week?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of it's pretty resourcey. It's nothing too difficult, I don't think. As you said there, we've had a couple of different events that they kind of, I suppose you could chalk this up as a bit of a gimmicky event. You've got sort of 2 fields there and all those sort of things, but it's one of those ones to grow the game. It's fine, it's good. We've got a slightly, I guess, improved field, if you want to call it that, this week because of some of the guys that sort of missed out on the Olympics and are just coming for the European Tour event. So the top of the market with Andy Sullivan, Justin Harding, Rory Cantor, Armitage, Brady, John Catlin. There's some guys here. Catlin obviously won on this golf course last year. There is some guys here that are of interest and are people that we need to follow, but I'll certainly be starting my card a bit further down.
Yeah, I think Justin Harding to me is the one who is as in ripe a form as you really can get. Obviously made a little scare of it at the Open Championship. And then the week prior, losing out just last week, but he has been, a consistent first page on the leaderboard. Of course, getting down to 11 to 1 odds. I debated Aaron Rye last week at 18 because I thought similar trends were happening in 18, maybe a little bit of value into there, but 10 and 11, for Sullivan and Harding is just too much of an ask for me. However, I've structured my card a little bit different. We're going to align on our second pick, but I am going to go with what I'd refer to as the defending champion at this course. Go back to John Catlin here. Catlin is a golfer who I kind of deem as one of those prolific winners, somebody who has had success at every single level, finding the winner's circle. We saw it, twice just last year in a 3-week span, I believe that was, or a short span with this victory. And then, early on this year, outdueling Maximilian Kiefer in that long playoff that we got lucky to come out with that winner. But Catlin just seems to be finding the ball striking recently that brings back this light. And at 28 to 1, you could argue against him versus, Kawamura, Armitage, Cantor. He's not to the Harding types, but I don't think he's 2.5 times the odds, versus him and Sullivan, where, the amount of victories between the 3 Catlins right there. So in my opinion, we've seen the strokes gain approach, even when he missed the cut at the Scottish Open leading into the Open Championship, was really good from a ball striking perspective. Last week, again, continued that form. I'm not a course history truther, so to speak, but enough value into 28 to 1 that to back him there, he's my pick of the litter at the top of the board.
Yeah, it's like you say, there's not so much being a course truther we like, but it's never something really good because all of my guys have kind of got their course history here, but we know he can do it. And as we've said before on him, there was a kind of knock in him that he can only play one side of golf. He was better at tough events. I mean, that's all been thrown out the window. We know he's quite versatile. He's certainly as talented as the guys around him in the betting, and like you say, he's not more than twice likely to win as Justin Harden. I think Andy Sullivan's slightly different kettle of fish. If he turns up, he can win. He can win by a distance, but. Yeah, I really do like him, John Catlin. I'll start my card a bit further down, as we just come to, and this is more on potential in Santiago Tarot. Ben Santiago Tarot. He's just been in the form of his life, and he is 30 years of age. It's not like he's a newcomer, but he has certainly found his form. He's not finished outside the top 5 in his last 7 starts in the Challenge Tour, he's finished once outside the top 5, and it was a 16th place finish. Absolutely ridiculous. He should be at the Olympics, but for a committee error on Spain's part, he was going to take John Rahm's space. So he was 7th on his golf course in 2019 at the Northern Irish Open. So for me, this is a guy who's got 2 wins in his last 7 starts. Not barely outside the top 5. The tied 16th could have been slightly better as well. I make it that he could have probably won 4 times since the grand final, and including that last year as well. Once in Cape Town as well on Sunshine Tour. So it's not as if he, can't play anywhere else. There is the concern that he's never really finished higher than sort of 40th, I think, on the European Tour. But guys need to be in that, in that firing line when they're in form. He's a changed golfer as this last year's gone on, and we'll see how he makes a step up. This is a nice way to ease yourself into a European Tour field, I would say.
Oh, it's perfect. It's the exact opportunity you dream for as somebody in his form to get on the European Tour. And I mean, he's going to have status next year based off of what he's done on the Challenge Tour, but to make a run, at playing this year, to continue that form, that is a great point that I never thought of. He is the next Spanish golfer in the OWGR ranking. So did he declined his offer, or what did they probably couldn't get there in time? Did they say?
They got the paperwork wrong, or something. There was something basically he should be there, and there's been quite an upset about it among the Spanish players that he should have been there. So it's
wow,
it's a bit of a mess. But I don't quite know what it was. I imagine it's something so they couldn't get there in time, or weren't happy with how he didn't have got there in time. Patrick Reed's going to get there and not see the golf course, and maybe Spain just didn't want to do that.
I thought Campillo's going.
It's I have no idea.
Interesting.
What's going on. So,
but
that's the Olympics this year, right?
For sure. But regardless, I am with you on this pick. I normally don't structure a card with 2 golfers really up here, but I just think there's too much to kind of put aside when you look at that form. I mean, you're exactly right. 6 out of those 7 events are all inside the top 5. Just a ridiculous run, 1/16th, that you can really pick apart. And there is the 7th at the Challenge Tour event last year with that Koivisto 1. So yeah, it's just these are the type of golfers we like to take the chance on. There was some talk on Twitter, potentially is that number too short. It's short enough that it makes you double take, but enough, I think, juice in there. If it was 28s, 25s, that to me is a bit bigger of an ask, but 33s, I still felt confident in. The one that you kind of compare, I guess, in a sense, would be the up and coming of Vincent Norman, what he's continued to do outside of a 10 on his last hole on Saturday. Really, should have had an easy top 3, 4, 5 finish, managed to still sneak out a 10th place. But, we see him closer into the 25s to 28s. But I just, will take a little bit more juice to get into Tario for me as well. As we go down the card, I'm taking a giant gap until I'm really getting into anybody. But I know there's a couple golfers you're sticking with in this mid-range.
Yeah, and I haven't completely decided on these 2 guys in terms of definitely opting for them, just because of their their approach numbers are not quite where I want them to be. But Jack Senior is a previous course winner. As we know, he's been playing pretty well. He made the cut of the Open and was pretty good there for what I saw. Shot the ball nicely and has been playing some good golf on the European Tour. My kind of concern with him is when he's got in contention, he's kind of hit the reverse gear quite quickly. And Richard Bansal as well is someone that we talk about an awful lot. He was 9th in the strokes gained approach last week, which is a good number for him. Normally does all his damage off the tee, probably the best, one of the best, if not the best, off the tee in this in the field. I think Laurie Cantor may be up there as well. But yeah, I mean, as I say, he's got that course win. Whether that means anything, I don't know, but he was kind of trending right to contend and being a chance of winning in recent weeks. So I think that, both of those guys at the kind of 55, 60s numbers, I think they were, were pretty good to look at. But my one that I'm really kind of keen on is David Law. He's played some really, really good stuff, in recent weeks. He's made his last 6 cuts in the European Tour, 7th at the Porsche European Open. Again, it sort of ended on the 54-hole mark, so we don't quite know what he would have done in the final round. Could be a blessing in disguise. He finished 7th, could have been, he could have gone up and contended. 18th last week at Celtic Manor, and the 35th at the Scottish Open, which I was thought was really impressive. The strength of that field, I know it's kind of a home event for him, but he was tied 8th. He was only 4 back going into the final round, and there were some big names in that field, as we know. So people that were basically going on to contend in the major championship the following week. So I think that result, that tied 35th, although it's the worst of those bunch I just mentioned, really does kind of suggest that he can have a real good go of things, and he's got an 8th, 12th, and a 35th on his golf course as well.
One of my favorite things about David Law this year is, if you remember, they had to push back the 54-hole event when they had to go to Germany because of travel restrictions, and they got everybody together that next day to play in like an 18-hole fun match, all the guys that were stuck there. And again, little things of form. David Law shot like 10 under that day to finish like second in this 18-hole match. And he is a former ISPS Honda champion at the Vic Open that arguably was like out of nowhere. He was probably close to 4 figures that week at the Vic Open, where he has crossed the line before. So yeah, he's been somebody that you wake up and you see him, 6 under through 12 holes on a given day. And it feels like, okay, enough form is clicking that you can take a risk at that bet. When I really, again, if I'm structuring my card in the way where a couple golfers under 40-1 are going to be, my headline selections, I'm going to need to tone it down a little bit as I go deeper down the card. And I have a duo that I was on last week, who I thought showed enough of life that I really want to go back in at the similar numbers that they are. First off, Bryden McPherson at 80-1. He had an outstanding Thursday, 4 under par, sat 3 back of Vincent Norman and Nacho after the first day. Was, his live odds 28, 33s. And it was like, okay, he hadn't had any OWGR golf events in a 3-month stretch of time. So to show that life on the first round and then kind of faltered back as the week went. Friday was really ugly, but it was really ugly for a lot of people that got stuck in that afternoon wave. You saw a lot of golfers going backwards, kind of putting it back together on their final stretch, which McPherson unfortunately didn't really do. But that number is identical to what, books had him at last week. And I think this event is a decent drop off in field strength at the top compared to what we had. So McPherson would be the first one that I don't want to just put aside after he got that rust off. So he would be one. And then the golfer who finished better of the 2 last week, who just had a steady incline day after day. I thought there was a chance to get him into the places after he was 150-1 last week. The Chilean, maybe he's inspired by, Neiman and Mito Pereira at the Olympics, but Hugo Leon will find his way back on my card. Best I could find was a 90-1. Steady 14th place finish. Improved as he went along the week. He did have a scare of the places Saturday afternoon, never really touched inside the top 10, unfortunately, but one low round away from paying off in a big way. So I really think that game, if we mentioned Leon in the past, he was one of the better ball strikers on tour 3 years ago before he kind of had a falling out on the European tour, didn't kind of get his status back, has kind of been injured, comes back on the Challenge Tour, misses out to Marcel Seam, like we talked about last week, and then 14th place finish. That's a strong finish for him. So I'm going to go back to the wall 90-1 for Leo.
And the thing with McPherson, like you say, it's the first event he's played in a long time in an official event, and to show kind of flashes of that straight away. 76 second round, but as I said to you earlier, there was so many bad scores out there, and it wasn't just limited to that one day. I mean, Cameron Hill shot 79 on the final day. There was just some brutal scores out there, and he shot a pair of 70s over the weekend. Again, not going to set the world alight, but that's 3 rounds of 70 or better, par or better on the golf course after a 3-month layoff. Certainly encouraging. I think he was 21st. His strokes gained approach in the field last week, which is fine. his first start back. Hugo Leone 38th in strokes gained approach, but obviously did it in other ways. And we know he's a really good ball striker, so that can improve from that number, which it certainly can. Then yeah, great. And like you say, it would be remiss to just jump straight off just because of a couple of, they weren't even bad finishes, they were just not what you had hoped for.
Yeah, and that's like I said, a weaker field, the same number for McPherson, a decline deserving. So if you're going to finish 14th, those odds are going to get shrunk a little bit. So yeah, I think it's easily to go back to the well, but very valid points you make from that perspective. Now we kind of turn, I guess, a little bit deeper. There's one more for me. I guess there's a little bit over triple digits for the next golfer, but I'll let you intro who you are interested in this range.
Yeah, so I mean, I've got two guys from this way, and they are just both, like I said earlier, that they're course plays really, because although you don't want to rely too much on course form. We saw someone like Callum Shinkman last week show that you can come out of form when you love a golf course. Clemens Sorday was 17th in strokes gained approach last week. Didn't have the best of finishes, but he's a winner on this golf course, and he's got a 6th place finish as well. 34th and 28th in his two most recent starts here. So he's hardly set the world alight since that win, but he's has won on this golf course. It is a weaker field, and he's right there at triple digits. So, I think he was 175 to 1 to 1.
Yeah, and that course, I guess this course overall has had its fair share of history for somebody who's been around the block quite a bit, as Sorday has, getting that 2015, 2016 familiarness with success at this course is probably favorable to his return here.
And he's a four-time Challenge Tour winner as well, which,
yes,
when we talk about the field strength, it isn't, I don't think it's much above a Challenge Tour event. Even you can probably say that Armitage, Harding, and Sullivan, are real European Tour guys, stand-up guys. Caramora as well, maybe. Laurie Cantor, I think the jury's still out. I think that there was, some flashes last year, and I think he took advantage of the lockdown. But certainly don't think he's fully fledged as this star in the making just yet. Twaggy, I suppose, would be one of the class players up there as well. But I don't think there's much of a jump, really.
Yeah, so that's why you kind of go into those guys. And one golfer that I thought showed a lot of life, of course, in round 4, closing with, I believe, a 63, was Shubhankar Sharma. Sharma is a golfer who probably hasn't followed through on what we would have thought that potential was. In the thick of it at the WGC Mexico, that I can really remember vividly after he came off of a win on the European Tour. So it's been a little bit of, I guess, lack of fulfillment of what a lot of us set out for him, but he finds extremely hot irons. It seems like every other month. And that really came through with that Sunday score. But, totaling up last week, he was second in the field in approach of guys who are playing this week, gaining over 7 strokes. The Scottish Open, he also gained over a stroke per round there as well. So enough life in, I guess, a last 18-hole sample, plus what we know out of Sharma's kind of upside that possesses him. I definitely think there's enough there at the number versus some of the other golfers he's kind of sprinkled around to give it a shot this week.
And this is the thing, people go, he only had one good round, it vaults him up a position, and it was kind of a false finish, right? But he was actually, I think he was just outside the top 20 after 2 rounds. It's just a really bad Saturday that sent him back. And like you say, you're not talking about someone who just had one good finish at WGC once, and that was it. He was really, really good for a decent period of time. And I do wonder with these guys, obviously being from India, whether it's just a case of there's such a limited amount of good golfers from that kind of country. You had a couple of Arjun Artwell and people like that, but Hiri. But I think that when someone like that comes along, the whole country kind of pins hopes on them, and I think there's a lot of media attention, a bit like Japanese golfers and things like that. You can see the Olympics this week. I just wonder if that kind of thing takes over sometimes. It's probably hard to just get on with your golf. I don't know if that's the case. It may just be that he couldn't sustain the form that he was in.
Yeah, and it's ultimately, I think, the number, seeing still triple digits where, again, his finish 32nd, last week, but I believe that was the round of the day by 2 strokes on Sunday. Again, out of contention, nowhere to really be looked at. But yeah, I think there's enough in that life where he's shown some big time finishes, of course, 2-time winner on the European Tour. And also what was interesting to me is looking at Nacho's progression, even though he was missing cuts. I mean, not to say that he was anywhere near my radar, but his approach, if you look at those previous 2 events that he had into leading up to last week, were some of his better numbers of the entire season. Yeah. So again, being let down by short game or, but if the one thing that you're going to need to click in order to win is your putter, it finally was able to really come through for him. But there was enough life, would have been like, okay, maybe the miscuts, you could kind of read through the tea leaves to see something popping for Elvira. And that's what we're trying to do as well for Shubhankar Sharma. Yeah, absolutely. And then my last guy really is a complete stab in the dark. I think he's kind of 350 to come over here, maybe 250 to come there stateside. Is someone that we went to in Kenya was Bernd Ritthammer. And I went that week based on purely on a couple of decent finishes on the Challenge Tour in Kenya. And he really did look like he was going to, pull off for us. He was right out there for a sustained period of time during that week and just fell away on the Sunday. But his course form here is absolutely ridiculous. He's got a second, third, and a fifth. He's 3 of those starts out of 5. So for me, although it's he's not in form, he hasn't had a real good finish since the 20th at the Canary Islands, but this is a guy that's won 3 times on the Challenge Tour. He's proven earlier in the year in Kenya that he does go back to golf courses he really likes and can perform well. And the upside is that he's a Challenge Tour winner. And I think, like I said earlier, it's pretty much a Challenge Tour event. And you're getting kind of 250, 300 to 1 about a guy that can win that level. As I sort of referenced earlier, Callum Shinkwin was just nowhere to be found for weeks upon weeks upon weeks. I think since he won Aphrodite Hills, and he had a single top 10. So there are guys that just get onto a place, feel really comfortable, and Bernd Ritthammer should do that too. Yeah, and I think you have such an insight. I think also when you look at some of the feels on the courses for these guys, a little maybe when there's lesser talent in the field, I guess a lower field strength, potentially that's when these type of vibes will pay off even more versus, the best players in the world showing up to the same course over and over again, whether you've played it exceptional in the past versus horrific. They are elite golfers in the world that can show up no matter the time and place. There was one that kind of stood out. I am not ended up betting him, but I argue with, Santiago Tarrio. If you looked at the next informed golfer from the Challenge Tour, Daniel Gavins would probably be the next informed one, who's coming off of back-to-back top 10s, just a string of top 25 finishes, I guess top 26 finishes in his last 10 starts. You see Paul Peterson coming back after a good run on there. I believe, again, the European Tour site was a little glitchy for me today, but is Craig Howie in the field? He is. Okay, so Craig Howie is another talented golfer coming up from the Challenge Tour, likely to get a card, who has contended actually a little bit on the European Tour. He stands out a little bit for me. We mentioned Josh Geary even last week. But I guess also Blake Winfred or Windred is somebody who also has a ton of talent, is a young golfer he's out of New Zealand or Australia, right? Who's got a lot of talent, and he's part of Niall Horan's club, or Modest Golf, who is the sponsors, I believe, of this string of events. So excited for him to get a big shot here. But the one that I'm going to wrap up my card with, it's not Austin Batista. He's close, though. He's back in the field. I'll be playing him on DraftKings, but a golfer priced in the outright market at the same is Ryan Lumsden. Ryan was a golfer out of Northwestern who actually showed a decent amount of promise, winning the Byron Nelson Award in 2019. He actually played in the AT&T Byron Nelson earlier this year on the PGA Tour, with brutal in it. Don't look at the stats there, but he had a decent career at Northwestern, enough to earn that award. And then his professional start, when he's gone up in any sort of rankings, Challenge Tour, Mixed event, on the European tour. He played a little bit to end out 2020. Hasn't seen that amount of success roll over. But what he has really found a liking for recently is the Alps tour. Back-to-back weeks, second, and then a first. Before that, he also had found a win in April on that event on the Alps tour as well. So he's two-time winner this year, has won on the MENA tour as well. Kind of that, we bring off the reference often of Matt Wallace's type of trajectory to a decent card that gets you up and going. But again, winners on each stage. I'm a little taken back that we haven't seen that all, even in a challenge tour event yet. But again, the value that you get at 230s or even deeper, I think I saw 250s for him, is enough for an each way top 10. If you can get double digits, maybe on a top 20. I think he's somebody to take a flyer on the way end of the spectrum this week.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, like we say, there's just guys here that it sounds terrible. It's not going to be a take a lot of winning this week. I think there's going to be a lot of guys that get up in contention and sort of trip over themselves. Unless Andy Sullivan goes out and steamrolls the field, unless Justin Harding goes out and steamrolls the field. If those guys do it, they do it. They're 10, 11 to 1. If you want to double them up with someone in the Olympics you really, really like, or do something like that, then fine. But certainly for us, and this, our approach to the game is to kind of find these guys and give us a price. If we've got 70 to 1, 80 to 1 golfers and getting a quarter of the odds, I'll take that and try and pin my hopes on the winner. One guy just before we wrap things up that I didn't pick. He's let me down a couple of times in the past, and he's kind of never really fulfilled his potential. But that's Matthew Baldwin. He's been second on this golf course before. He's had a couple of top 25, top 26 finishes in the last 4 starts. 9th on the Challenge Tour, 26th on the BMW International European Tour. Took back-to-back top 20s, 5, 6 starts ago. So he can play really, really well. He's the type of guy that will go 5 or 6 under through 10 holes, and you think you've got a great chance, and he suddenly disappears again. But it's just one guy to look at. I think he's 175.
Yeah, the last one that I would kind of throw a mention to, we heard this name, it must have been early 2020, I think, either at the Omega or Abu Dhabi. But the amateur Josh Hill is making another start on the European tour. I believe he was 15 years old when he won on the MENA Golf Tour as an amateur, had 2 other top 10 finishes in 19. He is only 17 years old right now, but he just came off top 20s at the amateur championship in the St. Andrews Links. So I guess Jess would have been a little bit earlier this summer in June for those. So again, a promising career. I do remember him playing against Brooksy in one of those practice rounds, beating him in 9 holes. I think he tweeted or Instagrammed it out. Brooks loves practice rounds and taking things serious outside of the golf course. But so that is just kind of a fun thing with Josh Hill, but excited for that. So he's getting another start way down there. He's probably going to be min price on DraftKings.
I think he's played here twice before, isn't he? And he was 53rd back in 2019. He shot a second round 67. He blew up in the third round, shot 77. So he's got the ability, like you say, there, very young winner. And as we say, I don't think it's someone you're going to put your weight behind. I don't think you get excited like he did in the 1500s one shot last week. But it's a guy to mention. It just is that type of field where there's going to be someone from this 600, 500, 400. Your guy Alejandro Tosti's down there. There's so many good guys down there in these numbers that it really wouldn't surprise me. Tom McKibben's a guy that I mentioned before, who's going to make waves at some point. Steely veteran Tongchai Jaide's down here at 400 to 1. So there's going to be some names that are going to float up the leaderboard that you think either you've never heard of them or you haven't seen them for 10 years. But I think that's the theme of the week.
Now, I think it's, with respect to getting into the Olympics, I'd want to, kind of wrap up our European tour side here and then transition over to Tokyo. So if you don't mind going through your card one more time for everyone.
Yeah, so absolutely. I started my card with Santiago Tarrio, 28 to 1, 33 to 1, I think it was earlier today. Just in great form. I haven't decided about Jack Senior and Richard Mansell yet, but they will kind of feature in some way or another. David Law, certainly for me, Clemens Sorday, and Bern Rickhammer as well.
Awesome. I will be going in from the top. We mentioned John Catlin. You can find him around 28s. Santiago Tario with you. That was 33s. Bryden McPherson, 80-1. Hugo Leon, 90s. Shivakar Sharma was around the 125, 130 range. And then Ryan Lumsden was right around 250s, might even find 300s out there for him. And then as well, this is, I guess, the combo event on the ladies side of it. Do you know, I believe there's 2 golf courses at this event. I think there is a secondary cut after 54 holes as well, but crowning 2 separate champions.
Yeah, that's it.
So, Athaya Thitical, who we were both on last week at the Avion Championship, couldn't really put a string of birdies together on the back 9. She almost had a shot finishing solo 5th. So she had an exceptional week. She is the 9.5-1 favorite over Lee Six. So excited for the ladies over there for some opportunities, as they also, a subsection of the best lady golfers in the world, gear up for the Olympics next week too. So with that, let's really go into what we are deeming, the first time, I guess, if we look back on what 2016 was, I feel there's a bit more hype around this Olympics. We're seeing, I would think, a little bit stronger of a field. Of course, we saw John Rahm and Bryson DeChambeau both have to withdraw, but we are at Kasuma Gasecki. Yeah, Kasuma Gasecki. I think that's how Pat said it.
You get 4 marks from me. That's fine.
That's decent. I see some claps in the background, so we got this going. So they're going to be teeing it up there. There is 2 different courses that are on the country club. I believe, as we talked this morning, Hideki has won on both of them, but the Japan Junior was played on this course. Tom Fazio redesigned, par 72, a little bit lengthy, 7,500 yards. You have a couple course comps that you're going to be rolling with this week.
Yeah, so I like Firestone. There's a lot of people out there that think it's a Fazio design. I think it was actually a Robert Jones, but Fazio certainly, he had a course on the Firestone location as well, but certainly seems to have some similar vibes to it. And CPC Southwind as well. Joe John Waternon was there, said that it was very, very similar in terms of the heat. The Zoysia grass as well. So for me, if you can look at those 2 events, there's one guy that immediately stands out to me in both of those events that we'll come on to in a minute. But that is where I was kind of looking. And I think there was a quote from Fazio that kind of said it was like a northeastern Donald Ross track, which would take you to a runner meet for the BMW Championship 2018. And there's just been some really, really weird comparisons. I think Finno sort of shouted out kind of Monterey Peninsula. Someone else said Spyglass Hill. So I guess Pebble Beach results would be good. RSM Classic, another Fazio design. So there's so many places. But again, it's just purely guesswork. I think, like you said on this, on just previously, that these are the elite of the elite, right? They're all kind of in the same kettle of fish, except for Hideki, who's seen it twice when he was 10 years old. So everyone else is going in blind, and talent will take over. So it really is just, I think there is a motivation aspect to it. I think there are guys that are more motivated than others, as we'll come on to in a minute, for guys that don't know military service, or some of the Korean guys. And, I certainly think some of the British golfers are more motivated than others. And I think it's the same with the Americans as well, right?
Yeah, that's, I think we stay in our lane ultimately on our show, where we're going to kind of preview who we, enjoy or fancy this week from the main European Tour golfers. But yeah, I'm pretty excited for the week. I think a lot of us are rooting for Siwoo Kim and Sung Jae Im, who, have a lot to be playing for. Very excited for those golfers with a lot of pressure on their shoulders for what's ahead. So hopefully we can see them on the podium. I wouldn't be sleeping right on Wednesday if, I didn't have a ticket for both of those guys, just because we've been waiting. It feels like a half a decade for these bets. So I'm excited for both of them. But yeah, as we go really through it, there's just a lot of comps to your point. I have heard everything under the sun, I feel like, at this point, on what this course could play like. But, I think ultimately it boils down to form. It does boil down to, caring about if you're there. To your point, seeing some of the golfers tweet about it. Tommy's tweet fired me up a little bit today. How excited he said he's to be at the Olympics.
If you think about, all jokes aside, you think about how much pride Justin Rose takes in the Olympics, and how, and I don't know if it's some of it's a bit media, and he kind of like lives up to the PR of it and all that sort of stuff. But Rose,
never.
Yeah,
never.
He loves a MasterCard advert and he loves a bit of cheesecake, whatever. But I think he is genuinely quite proud of his achievement, and I think Tommy Fleetwood is exactly the same. I think he's everyone brings up that quote when he was in Scotland. It's peeing down the rain. Everyone he sort of said, "I'll play in this. I love it, whatever." So I think he is the guy that will go out there and really, really love it. On the flip side, when they interviewed Rory McIlroy, they said, "Are you looking forward to playing at the Olympics?" And he kind of said, "I don't really know what there is to look forward to." He basically feels like he owes Ireland because of missing out in Rio, which is sad, really. I'd never want someone to feel like they have to go there, but that is what it is. He could easily go and walk it by 5 shots, so I'm not going to try and second guess one of the best players in the world.
Yeah, I agree. And it's, again, a narrative style betting. You do get 4 rounds without a cut. So I think it's more likely that the cream rises to the crop or to the top, after having, no really downside to what a Wednesday night, or I guess Thursday 75 may bring, compared to, it normally does on a week in, week out basis. I do kind of like the golfers that, went right over there. Again, if you talk about the preparation of Siwoo and Sung Jae, they withdrew from the Open Championship to be there in time. It's got to be a hard travel for Patrick Reed, Johnny Vegas, Mito Pereira, just finishing up in Minnesota, having come all the way to Tokyo. And I wouldn't be surprised if we do see another withdrawal or two happen with how the testing protocols are, which I think is more safety on being there earlier. So make sure you're paying attention close to lock. If we really looked kind of running through the board, again, I don't want to talk through each of the 60 golfers or else we're going to be here all night long. But, at the top of the board, I actually do find some intrigue in Paul Casey at 18-1. Yeah. He was one of the golfers that when odds were out, when Bryson and Jon Rahm were in the field, he kind of sat in that same range. Pat and Jeff did their preview show a little bit earlier in the week. I think it was on last Friday before either of those withdrawals hit. And they mentioned how Casey was that same number, 18-1 on Friday, and how it was just too short, but they liked what he was going for. Now you back out those two guys, there's probably a little bit of value in Paul Casey, who arguably is having, outside of Morikawa, I mean, I guess, Hideki does have, the Masters on his side, but you could argue that Casey has the second best year out of any of the golfers teeing it up in Tokyo.
Yeah, I mean, he's just playing phenomenally, right? He's just, again, I don't think he's going to be excited as Tommy Fleetwood, but having someone like Tommy Fleetwood in your camp is going to, certainly help. And he's very much, I think, like the Justin Rose profile, striking the ball incredibly well, and that's all that really matters, right? Played well in Asia in the past, which is obviously, I don't know whether you see that as a big factor, but it's always helpful. They can travel. I think the Shallow Creek last year is another place that people sort of come to. So, there's certainly certain aspects to it. I think the first guy that I sort of came to, and it was mainly because of the Southwind and the Firestone comp, was Shane Lowry. It's a guy that we've been talking about for, it feels like basically since we started his program, on and off for the big events. And he's just been phenomenal, isn't he? We keep running out of words for him. His approach numbers are great. He keeps popping up in certain events, looked dead at the Open a couple of times and really bounced back there. If there's any sort of those comps in those TPC Southwinds and the Firestone, and obviously he's a winner at Firestone, 6 or top 9, I think it was, at TPC Southwind last year. I think he's going to be a guy that's very, very proud to represent his country. Ireland, with great respect, don't tend to have a big pedigree of sporting success outside of maybe golf and Padraig Harrington, so they'd certainly like to add to their medal count there as well.
Yeah, Shane Lowry probably had one of the best back to school Olympics pictures, just smiling in his jumpsuit as they all went off. Those are some of the favorites that were going around. But yeah, I mean, he's just had a sneaky year, I think is the best way to describe it, because he has been rather good and not getting, people are getting paid off on some each ways or top 10s, on Lowry's year. But yeah, I think he sits in a sweet spot when it comes to the outright market. As I go in, you guys know I'm going to have a weekly bet on Guido Migliozzi, who's finding himself in the 50s to 70s. I actually
surely.
I snagged a triple digits the other morning on Guido for the Olympics. They're just like, here, Skylar, happy Sunday morning to you. We know you're going to bet it. Here's a little sweet thank you. And I was like, okay, I'm in. But yeah, again, the toughest of tests, someone who's excited, someone who now has his roommate, Renato Piratore there with him to play and enjoy. They got into Olympic Village, or not Olympic Village, where they're staying at, I believe, last night. We're out on the course today. So yeah, I absolutely love going to Guido, and he feels like in the range that you're still, can fight for a place, can fight for a victory. Ultimately with losing out on Bryson and Rahm, it does open the field up a little bit more. And again, he just likes to come off of maybe disappointing weeks and find his best finishes of the year. Both times we've mentioned it, where he has cashed the each way tickets, have been the longest of ones you've seen in his odds this year, have been the ones that he has cashed, those second or top 5 finishes. So, I have no problem going back to Guido, of course. And again, I'm okay at 60s up to, the hundreds that we have. But, hopefully he can find that ball striking short game to have that good mix where he can compete with the best in the world, like we saw at Torrey Pines.
Yeah, absolutely. And, there was a couple, it's tough for me this week because a lot of the guys that I really do like, are PGA regulars, which we don't talk about on here. They basically don't exist. Just to correct off what I said earlier about Ben Terrio partnering Rahm. Obviously, Rahm's out, and it's actually Adrian House that he would have been playing with. Adrian House is down there at kind of 200 to 1. I kind of skipped past him, and a lot of people, as I referenced earlier about CBC Southwind, it was Jenna Watson that made that comment. And you talk about guys in the field that have kind of got experience of playing in this area, right? Well, Jazz has, he spent a long time in the Japan Tour, a couple of top 3 finishes there. I think he's won 5 or 6 times in Asia, across the Asian and Korean Tour as well. So for someone of his age and his kind of profile, I think it could be a really, really good event for him. I don't think people have missed that. I think everyone's kind of well on board with him, but it certainly helps that he's kind of gone thoughtful, thought about where it sort of correlates to, seems pretty happy with the conditions and what he likes as well. So I think Jazz Janawatson could make strides this week. And for me as well, everybody's going to obviously be talking about Victor Hovland this week, and rightly so. He is the Norwegian golfer of choice. But Christian Krogh Johansson has very secretly had a massive year, and it's been coming for a little while. I kind of spoke with a guy that actually manages him, or did manage him, and he's been talking about his talent for an incredibly long time, and it's kind of sort of coming to the fore now. He probably would have been really good. He probably would have been up there in the betting this week. He was second in Northern Ireland last year. But he's just been on a tear on the Challenge Tour. We're talking about Ben Terrio, and he's been pretty much the same. He hasn't got that victory, which is a bit of a stumbling block, and you probably won't be seeing him win the Olympic medal this week. But he's kind of like 400 to 1 for like the top. I don't know what the each way is over there, but you can kind of get 6 places over here. He's 500 to 1 for 6 places over here. So maybe for some of our British viewers, they might like that one. But yeah, other than that, I kind of thought Fabrizio Zanotti has shown sort of form in these sort of short field events with some strong iron play at times. And otherwise, I think it's going to be, like you said, I think it's just going to be the top of the betting. I think there's a lot of guys there from the PGA Tour that really will take the places up.
I think 2 similar bets, and one I think is gaining popularity in Hoshino this week, yep. Who, if you go with familiarity on the grounds, or not even the grounds, but the country, the conditions, what it may be, a I think 4-time winner on the Japan Golf Tour. We've seen a lot of good finishes out of him. Of course, popped in the major championships this year with some really good approach numbers. So his number is kind of slashed from the 250s down to the 150s with a couple withdrawals. But the other golfer who has a ton of familiarity on the Japan Golf Tour is Sean Norris. We've seen him have, I would say, solid finishes. I mean, if you look, his last victory isn't from, I guess, 2019. He only has 1 to his OWGR name, wherein that was actually on even one of the smaller tours over there. I think that was I think it's called the Abema Tour. I don't even know if that's actually in Japan or not, but he plays on the Japan Golf Tour a good amount of time, has okay success over there, second place 3 times out ago. He was tuning up at an all-pro tour event in the States not that long ago. So one of the bigger mini tours where he finished 3rd in that event. Again, going from a mini tour to the Olympics. It's kind of funny to see, rooting for him though. I think he can make some promise. But the last one that I would talk about, who I feel just has a touch of value and really shows up in big time courses. I say this because Mackenzie Hughes had a Q&A on his Twitter on his flight over, and he said a little bit of Riviera comps would be the way he sees the course. I actually think Hughes is very live this week with the way he showed up in majors. But sticking for our European Tour guys, Riviera always sticks out in my head as the best finish we've pretty much seen stateside out of Thomas Pieters. Pieters is a golfer who shows up when it matters the most. Masters, of course, with their US Open through 54 holes. I honestly thought he had a real chance to win that event. He's a golfer who I think ultimately probably should have capitalized on a few more victories. I guess he only has 4 to his name, but just steady finishes recently, but his off the tee game is spectacular. So on tree line courses with some thicker rough, like it's going to be, if he can take advantage with his distance, I actually think that's a really strong opportunity for him. I know there was a debate on the Belgian Bombers between Dietrich and Pieters for Pat and Jeff, but I think there's a clear 1A to the 1B in Pieters for me. So you can find Pieters, I guess, he was closer in the 70 range, DraftKings Sportsbook this week. So he would be my last selection. So that kind of rounds out our thoughts there for the Olympics. So fun week overall, excited for both of them. DraftKings contests are boosted for the Olympics, but they have just been posted as well for the European Tour. So any other last thoughts for you, Tom?
No, I think that's kind of it for me. I think it kind of sums up pretty well. As I say, there's a couple of guys that we will both like. Mackenzie Hughes was one of them, but that's not the point of the show, right? We can discuss those with other people. But yeah, I think it's really tough for the Olympics. I think to get excited, one, about the whole Olympics as a whole in general. I think it was a really disappointing opening ceremony, for example. I haven't watched a single minute of the Olympics. We won like 5 golds today, so I think that the interest is pretty low in it due to COVID. I think the golf interest is kind of low on it, and we try and build it up with content and get excited about it. And it will be. We'll watch it if it's on and we can catch it. It just depends on timing and things like that. But it's a 60-man field, and half of the guys that are in it are already out, and maybe 20, 30 guys can't actually play golf. So it's a tough sled. We'll see. Hopefully it comes back, because it would be a shame to lose that spot in the Olympics as a sport, because it seems like something that took a really long time to get into Olympics, and then if it kind of blows its chance by being really boring for 2 years, maybe they need to mix up the format.
Yeah, I'm hoping that we do see an awesome finish and an opportunity of golfers. I mean, we haven't talked to Rory Sabatini yet in his venture into being an Olympian. I guess you can talk about him in that sense. But yeah, no, I'm really hoping for a fun week on that, because to your point, I think I love the Olympics. I enjoy, watching swimming. I've had fun, watching the basketball team not show up yesterday morning. We've had, if you watch handball, I think there's just random things that we get excited about for the first time in 5 years that we get to watch. But hopefully golf, can bring some light and be a strong finish to show the lights. And the ladies' side of it should be spectacular the following 100%. Week. So excited to really get into that too. But no, that puts a bow on our week. Remember, if you prefer the audio side of our shows, you can subscribe to us at any of the platforms at Daily Fantasy Sports, Picks and Bets, The Mix. Pat has a ton gearing up for football this coming season. His show, or his new site, Run the Sims, is getting live now. So please feel free to sign up for that if you enjoy the statistical side of diving into it. Yes.
I have no idea what I'm talking about. So that's
amen. Yep. I'm going to end it on that. So, because we don't know that side of it, but hopefully we'll be coming back next week with you, another golf winner for our show. For everyone here this week, thank you again and best of luck.